So now we can kind of get into a little more grounding, a little more footing with Chinese history, and when we get into this Shang dynasty, so kind of this Jia dynasty and Emperor Wu Yu are sort of these sometimes called mythical dynasties because they only really exist on paper. Though there were probably rulers well before the Shang dynasty, so there maybe some historicity there, but it's the Shang dynasty where we actually have credible evidence, datable evidence, where we can see an actual empire forming. It was founded presumably by this guy Emperor Tang in 766. Established a political hierarchy, an imperial system with rulers. Um, we know a little bit about their society, though not so much. We do have some records of them we'll get into a little bit, but most of the records are more based on a political side of things and the social side of things. But we can kind of get that that the rulers, we have the names of them, and they ruled around predominantly northern China. Thing about the Shang dynasty is they had multiple different capitals. They didn't have a single capital. Which again, maybe they hadn't quite tamed the Yellow River yet. They kind of had to continually move around. Maybe there was 500 years too, so moving back around. Anyang was one major site, and Shangqi was another. They did kind of overlap a little bit into southern China, but or sorry, the Yangtze River, but mainly their power base was in the north. What we know a lot about them from is that we have a lot of their burials grounds. And so we know that they buried their rulers. This is one of the most famous ones. This is Queen Fu Hao, she ruled about 1200 BCE. She's a wife of King Wu Ding. So we know these kind of things. I'll show you here in a little bit. They did develop a writing system, so we have records there. We have Shang burial sites in 6 capitals. There are about another 1,000 towns. So this is definitely a very urbanized world, early urbanized civilization. Yeah, so we have royal tombs. So we know there were political rulers, and we have their names. And this is what one of their tombs looks like. You can kind of see a lot of the material culture here. These are a lot of bronze bowls. We also have pottery. Stone sculptures, jade objects, cowrie shells. I don't know if you can see there, but cowrie shells were one of the first forms of money. So we can get a lot of kind of what the world was like for these early Shang rulers. So we have evidence from their burial sites. So a very prosperous society. Here's some other Shang bronze weapons, vessels. Here's I think I showed this in the beginning. This is a very famous bronze, I guess a little tray or a bowl. Here's a tray, so you can see some early art, some early Chinese art. This is an early ceremonial axe. Here's an early knife. So bronze was very much part of this Shang world. So, and a lot of this was pulled up out of these burial sites. The other thing we have here is a form of writing. So this is the earliest form of writing in China. In fact, this kind of shows you similarly how we saw in other areas that writing evolves over time. You could look back at the Phoenicians and the alphabet if you wanted to, and how you can take the modern alphabet and trace it backwards. Similar with contemporary Chinese. So this is regular Chinese script now, which goes back. You can see how it was over time. There were more pictograms. That then were changed. You can kind of see how it isolates and changes over time. Oscillates, I guess. And so we have these, and what are called oracle bones. So in China, what they did is they would write on shoulder blades of ox and also turtle shells, as they would write prophecies. We'll see why prophecies are important a little bit later, but so they write these prophecies. Am I going to rule, or are we going to have droughts, or what should we go to war? All these things. They'd write these prophecies on these bones, and we can read them because you can trace them back over time to get a sense of this, and then as they would heat these up, and as they cracked, one person's job of early China was to interpret these. What do these cracks mean? How do they is it good or bad? So But again, a lot of when you have a writing system that can be read, you can infer a lot of stuff out of this. So names of kings are controlled in here, and different relations within there, and ideas of what sort of Shang world look like. You can pull out of these early oracle bones. So in their time, they were just trying to predict the future, but for us, we kind of see the past through these oracle bones. And in contemporary Chinese, writing is traceable to these earliest forms of writing, sort of, about 1500 BCE. Yeah, so Shang state, what we pull out of this is there was a distinct social hierarchy, particularly, imperial, royal, aristocratic families. We have mentions of different elements of society. There were definitely people, bronze makers, things like this. Farmers were very, very important as well. There was a reverence for royal families. There was definitely a veneration of ancestors already at this time within the Shang period. Here's two. We talked about the first king of Shang Tong here, and here's Queen Fu Yao that we have. So that's the Shang dynasty. So they were the first ones to kind of create a political center. And then out of them, they collapsed, and this new dynasty, the Zhao dynasty, emerged and controlled most of China, and then also integrated a little more conclusively this Chu dynasty that was on the Yangtze River. So the Zhao were able to kind of unify both of these rivers and control all these sort of smaller kingdoms as well. They were based here. There is founded by this guy named King Wen, who defeated the last Shang king of Dijin. And you wouldn't be surprised that Western Zhao, we have a lot of writings from the Zhao period. This is when Chinese literature really starts to come up with poetry and things. So we know, again, kind of the names of them. And so, as the story goes, the last king, the Shang king, Dijin, was a very awful king, right, which needed King Wen to overthrow and create this new imperial system, and to sort of justify this new ruling family, this new sense of what a Chinese emperor was emerged. And this is this Chinese emperor. When you became an emperor, you could claim what is called the mandate of heaven, or the Tiang Ming. Right? And if you can claim this, it basically means you are divine. It's your divine right to rule. And so there's the heavens. China doesn't really have an extensive sort of religious system, say like a host of gods that we see in, say, Mesopotamia or Egypt or the Vedic world, right? There is a sense of heaven that exists out there, and the emperor's job functions as sort of the conduit between the heaven and earth, right? So and so if you become emperor, you maintain this mandate of heaven, you claim it, and it's sort of determined. You're emperor by the determination of heavens. But the converse side of that is that anyone can get this mandate of heaven. Right? So, and we'll see as we go through Chinese history, we'll see at some point in time, some people who were born as peasants worked their way up through the military and were able to overthrow the emperor and claim this mandate of heaven. And really, when you see in Chinese history, you sort of see these oscillations of imperial rise and fall. So in the beginning, somebody comes up, claims this mandate of heaven that was established in the Zhao period, says, I have divine right to rule, and they rule for a while, and their family, they're passed down within this imperial family, and then after a few hundred years or so, that imperial family starts to sort of break apart. Other people kind of vie for power, and then ultimately a new group will emerge. And they will then claim the mandate of heaven, and they will start a new Chinese dynastic rule, another imperial rule. So, but this system, the imperial system, starts in the Western Zhao period. Again, this is another example. This is a bronze bowl that contains all the names of the Zhao king. So we have a pretty good, again, this historical understanding of who the Zhao kings, who they were, and how they ruled. So the Zhao dynasty is the first beginning of it was very organized. You were able to unify all these sort of smaller kingdoms under the. I think their capital was at Chang'an there, and then in the middle of it, the Zhao rulers started to kind of lose a little bit of control, and the Eastern Zhao, for the next 500 years, all these little kingdoms start to sort of break away. Zhao is still part of it, and they have the imperial family, so they have ceremonial rule, but these other sort of smaller states started vying for control. Again, kind of clamoring to claim this mandate of heaven. Nobody is very successful at it. No one comes up and kind of claims it. No one will do that until, which we'll see later on, the Qing dynasty is able to do that in about circa 256 BCE. But for this next sort of the sort of 500 sort of spring and autumn period, again, sort of reminiscent of this decline of the imperial world, small states are vying control. Here towards the end of it, you have this guy named Confucius that shows up. We'll talk about him a little bit more later on. State of Chu starts to kind of be important as well, sort of which was down here at the Yangtze River, starts to kind of work as part of this, integrate itself into these other sort of smaller kingdoms. And then you have this Warring States period where you really have this sort of civil war within all of China, no unifying power, which out of that, a group will emerge, the Qing, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But you can kind of see, again, this kind of shows the geography of the rivers, all these things of early China. But really what comes out of why the Zhao is important is this is the first literary period of Chinese history. You have this thing called the Book of Changes. I gave a little bit in the lecture here. There's a video about the Book of Changes, another prophecy, so similar to the early oracle bones. Now this gets sort of codified, and this I Ching comes up. It is a book, and what it is, and you make these hexagrams. There's a video I attached to kind of show. So you make these hexagrams by throwing coins. These hexagrams then will come out, and then they'll make this. Whatever hexagram comes out, it will relate to a specific prophecy, right? So you would ask a question, right? Am I gonna, am I gonna be prosperous this year, right? And then you read it, right? Yeah, in a sense, perseverance is kind of cryptic. If someone is not who should be, has misfortune. So, be true to yourself. Under heaven, thunder rolls, all things attain a state of incident, innocence. So, you would have to kind of ask the question, and then you can do it. Actually, the video kind of walks you through the process of how this is made. But you can kind of see the importance of prophecies within the Chinese world. There's this book of songs, which is early Zhao poetry. So you can see the importance of literature within early China as well. Another couple other things that are important that come up in the Zhao period. This is the beginning of silk production. We'll go on that a little bit later when we get into the Silk Road. Look at that. But this is an explainer of the silk is produced by the cocoons of these silkworms that eat the mulberry leaves, called sericulture. So silk is also attributed to be devised during the Zhao dynasty. That a little more in jade, but it's really sort of this Shang and Zhao are the first two as China transitions from sort of Neolithic to more settled, complex society to the implementation of a clear imperial world or imperial system, which emerges under the Zhao, and then that'll sort of, as we get into Chinese history, lay out that foundation and groundwork for later later Chinese empires.